Welcome to Part 2, and the exciting conclusion to the Demon Protocol. Rosenberg pressed a series of commands, and the star map dissolved, replaced by surveillance footage. It showed a planet, or what had once been a planet. The surface was a hellscape of red rock and black ash, illuminated by rivers of lava that carved glowing scars across the landscape. The atmosphere was thick with volcanic ash and toxic gases that swirled in perpetual storms. But it was the creatures that drew Aiden's attention. They moved across the hostile surface in massive packs, thousands of them, tens of thousands. They were vaguely humanoid but wrong in fundamental ways. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4. Some had too many limbs, others too few. Their bodies were covered in scales or fur or carapace or combinations of all 3. They ranged in size from barely larger than a human to massive brutes 3 or 4 meters tall. But what unified them, what made Aiden's blood run cold, was their behavior. They fought constantly, not organized warfare, but endless, savage combat. They tore at each other with claws and fangs and appendages Aiden couldn't name. The footage showed one creature literally ripping another apart, then being set upon by 3 more while it fed on its victims' remains. "What am I looking at?" Aiden whispered. "We discovered this world 6 months ago, during a deep survey mission through our experimental portal," Rosenberg explained, his voice taking on the enthusiasm of a lecturer describing a fascinating academic subject. "The planet itself is unremarkable, a hellish volcanic world orbiting a dying red dwarf star, roughly 6,000 light-years from here. But its inhabitants," he smiled again, that disturbing expression, "its inhabitants are extraordinary." "They look like demons," Aiden said. "Demons, monsters, bloodthirsty creatures, call them whatever you want. The point is what they can do." Rosenberg manipulated the display, bringing up new footage. "Watch this." The video showed a creature approaching a massive rock formation. As Aiden watched, the creature's body began to shimmer and fade, becoming translucent, then nearly invisible. It walked straight through the rock as if the solid stone didn't exist. On the other side, it resolidified, fully corporeal once more. "They can phase through matter," Rosenberg said. "We don't fully understand the mechanism, some kind of quantum tunneling effect that allows them to temporarily shift their molecular structure out of sync with normal matter. It's a natural ability, like a bird flying or a fish swimming." Aiden stared at the footage, his mind racing. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because these creatures can win your war." Rosenberg's eyes gleamed with fanatical certainty. "We can open portals on every occupied planet simultaneously. We release these magnificent beasts into Dominion-held territory. They'll tear through enemy forces like a knife through paper. The Dominion's combat robots, their fortifications, their weapons, none of it will matter. These creatures are perfect killing machines, and they're functionally endless. The planet has a population in the billions." "That's insane," Aiden said, though his voice lacked conviction. His mind was already working through the implications, calculating possibilities. "Is it?" Rosenberg challenged. "Your father is dead. Your empire is crumbling. In weeks, maybe days, the Dominion will demand unconditional surrender. You'll lose half your territory, maybe more. You'll face trial for war crimes. Yes, you too, as Constantine's heir and accomplice. Your entire civilization will be reduced to a subordinate power, dependent on Dominion charity for survival." He gestured at the hellish planet on the display. "Or you can fight back. You can show the Dominion that the Imperium still has teeth. These creatures will devastate their occupation forces. You'll reclaim your worlds. And when the job is done, we simply collect them and send them home." "How?" Aiden asked. "How do you control them once they're released?" Rosenberg pulled out a small device from his coat pocket, a handheld controller covered in buttons and displays. "Particle freezing technology. We developed it for hazardous material containment, but it works perfectly on organic matter. We can freeze these creatures in place, render them completely immobile with a single pulse. Each planet has PF emitters in the major population centers. We just need to activate them." He manipulated his controller, bringing up a schematic. "The process is simple. We open portals on all 237 planets simultaneously. The creatures pour through and engage Dominion forces. When enemy resistance is neutralized, which our models suggest will take between 6 and 12 hours, we activate the PF emitters, freezing all creatures in place. Then we use capture drones to collect them, open return portals, and send them back to their home world. Clean, efficient, and completely under our control. Aiden wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that unleashing unknown alien creatures on inhabited worlds was the act of a desperate madman. But he thought of his father, disintegrated without even being allowed to finish his sentence. He thought of the Imperium's 237 worlds falling like dominoes, their citizens facing Dominion occupation and punishment. He thought of standing trial, being held responsible for his father's war crimes. And he thought of the alternative, turning the tide, reclaiming their worlds, forcing the Dominion to negotiate from a position of weakness rather than strength. When can we start? The words came out before Aiden fully realized he decided. Rosenberg's smile widened. Immediately, everything is ready. I've been preparing for weeks, hoping your father would change his mind. The portal generators are positioned. The PF emitters are on standby. We just need authorization from someone in the chain of command. He produced a tablet and handed it to Aiden. On the screen was an official Federation authorization form, dense with legal language and technical specifications. Your signature here confirms the official order, Rosenberg said. As the Secretary Supreme Commander's heir and next in the succession, you have the authority to issue emergency military directives. Sign, and we begin immediately. Aiden stared at the tablet. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice was screaming warnings, telling him to slow down, to think this through, to consider the consequences. But that voice was drowned out by grief and rage and desperation. His father was dead. His empire was dying. This was the only way to save it. He signed. Perfect, Rosenberg said, taking back the tablet. His fingers flew across the screen, entering commands with practiced efficiency. This won't take long. I've already deployed drones to all 237 planets so we can witness the operation in real time. Let me bring up the feeds. The star map disappeared, replaced by a wall of video feeds, hundreds of them, each showing a different location on a different planet. Aiden could see cities, military bases, industrial complexes, all under Dominion occupation. Portals are opening now, Rosenberg announced, his voice thick with excitement. On every screen simultaneously, tiers appeared in reality itself, swirling vortexes of purple and black energy that expanded to roughly 3 meters in diameter. The portals hung in the air, pulsing with otherworldly power. Then the creatures came through. They exploded out of the portals like water bursting from a dam, dozens per second, then hundreds, then thousands. The beasts poured into every location simultaneously, an unstoppable tide of alien horror. Dominion combat robots responded immediately, their plasma weapons firing with mechanical precision. The first wave of creatures was cut down instantly, their bodies disintegrating under concentrated fire. But for every creature killed, 3 more emerged from the portals. The tide became a flood, became a tsunami. The creatures overwhelmed defensive positions through sheer numbers, tearing apart combat robots with savage efficiency. Aiden watched as a massive brute, at least 4 meters tall, grabbed a robot in each hand and literally ripped them in half, tossing the sparking remains aside before charging toward the next target. It's working, Aiden shouted, his earlier horror forgotten in the rush of victory. It's actually working. On screen after screen, Dominion forces were in full retreat. The creatures pursued with relentless hunger, their alien shrieks audible even through the drone cameras. Some locations were already completely overrun, the creatures rampaging through abandoned military installations, destroying everything they encountered. Aiden moved to his command console, pulling up communication channels. Get me all military commanders immediately. Emergency meeting in my quarters. We need to coordinate our counteroffensive while the Dominion is in disarray. He began issuing orders, calling up star charts, identifying key targets for Imperium forces to reclaim while the creatures kept the Dominion occupied. For the first time in months, he felt hope. They could win this. They could actually win. Then something on one of the video feeds caught his attention. In the background of a shot showing creatures overwhelming a military checkpoint, Aiden saw what looked like civilian structures, a residential sector, protected by massive reinforced walls designed to provide shelter during the war. These strongholds existed on every occupied planet, places where non-combatants could take refuge. As Aiden watched, one of the creatures approached the stronghold wall. It was a smaller specimen, maybe 2 meters tall, with a lean body covered in dark scales. The creature placed one clawed hand against the wall, and Aiden saw its body begin to shimmer. It turned translucent, ghostly, and then it walked straight through the wall. "No," Aiden whispered. On the other side, the creature solidified again. It looked around the interior of the stronghold for a moment, then moved to the massive security door. From the inside, the door opened easily. They were designed to keep things out, not to prevent exit. The creature opened the door. A flood of its companions poured through the opening, rushing into the civilian stronghold with terrible purpose. Aiden spun to check other feeds, his heart sinking. The same scene was playing out across dozens of screens, creatures phasing through walls, opening doors, allowing the horde access to protected civilians. "Dr. Rosenberg," Aiden shouted. "What's happening? Why are they attacking civilians? Freeze your monsters immediately." "Civilians?" Rosenberg looked up from his tablet, seeming genuinely surprised. "Oh, yes, I suppose that makes sense. They're designed to kill anything that moves. We should have anticipated." "Do something." The door to Aiden's quarters burst open. A group of military personnel rushed in, led by a sergeant whose face was twisted with horror and rage. "Aiden, what are you doing?" the sergeant screamed. "What have you done?" "I'm trying to win this war," Aiden screamed back, but even as he said it, he was watching the screens, watching the nightmare unfold. The creatures had found the civilians. Men, women, and children who had taken refuge in what they thought were impenetrable shelters were being slaughtered. The beasts tore through them with savage efficiency, their claws and fangs designed for killing, their alien biology optimized for death. Aiden watched a father try to shield his children. He watched the creature bat the man aside with casual strength, then fall upon the screaming youngsters with methodical brutality. He watched a group of elderly people huddled in a corner, embracing each other as the monsters closed in. He watched a young woman running, carrying an infant, tears streaming down her face, until something large and fast caught her from behind. "It's a minor adjustment," Rosenberg was saying, his fingers flying across his tablet. "I just need to open another portal to their home planet so fresh creatures stop coming through. Then we activate the PF emitters and freeze the ones already deployed. No big deal, just..." "No big deal." A military commander grabbed Rosenberg by his coat, lifting the scientist off his feet. "Civilians are being slaughtered. Children are dying." "Well, yes, but strategically." The commander threw Rosenberg against the wall. The scientist crumpled to the floor, his tablet skittering away. Another officer picked up the device and began entering commands, trying to figure out how to shut down the portals. Aiden couldn't look away from the screens. The carnage was beyond anything his mind could process. These weren't combat casualties. This wasn't war. This was massacre. This was genocide. The creatures moved through civilian populations with an efficiency that suggested this was their natural purpose, as if they had evolved specifically to kill. They showed no hesitation, no mercy, no recognition of surrender or innocence. They simply killed everything they encountered. Aiden's tears came silently, streaming down his face as he watched the horror he had unleashed. "Shutting down the source portals," an officer announced. On the screens, the purple vortexes began to collapse, cutting off the flow of creatures. "Activating particle freezing emitters." Across 237 planets, the PF systems engaged. Creatures froze mid-motion, some mid-strike, some mid-run, some with their jaws locked on victims who would carry the scars forever. The massacre stopped as suddenly as it had begun. But the damage was done. Dr. Rosenberg worked quickly, now under armed guard, to open return portals and activate the collection drones. The frozen creatures were gathered up mechanically and pushed back through the portals to their hellish home world. Within 2 hours, they were all gone, leaving behind only bloodstains and bodies and trauma that would echo across generations. 2 hours. The creatures had been loose for less than 2 hours. It would take days for the final casualty reports to come in, but the preliminary numbers were already staggering. Over 200 billion civilian deaths. Nearly a quarter of the Imperium Federation's entire population, killed not by enemy soldiers, but by monsters unleashed by their own leadership in a desperate gambit. More deaths than the entire war had caused up to that point. More deaths than most wars in human history combined. Aiden stood before the screens, watching recovery teams move through the devastation, and felt something break inside him. He didn't resist when one of the commanders, a woman he'd known since childhood, whose face now showed only disgust, raised a ceremonial pistol and pointed it at his chest. "Aiden Amorian," she said, her voice cold and formal, "I hereby charge you with high treason against the Imperium Federation, with mass murder, with crimes against humanity, and with violations of the fundamental laws of warfare. You are under arrest." Other guards seized Dr. Rosenberg, who was muttering something about acceptable losses and the price of victory. They were taken to a detention facility in the lower levels of the government complex. The cell was small and cold. Rosenberg continued his muttering about how they have no case, and how I was just following orders. Aiden simply sat on the narrow bench and stared at his hands. Hands that had signed the authorization. Hands that had unleashed hell. Hands that cost over 200 billion innocent civilians their lives. The end.